That 150 square foot studio apartment in Queens was an airless tin box that held my entire youth, and it was suffocating the life out of my relationship with Jessica. The air was a permanent cocktail of damp mildew, greasy smoke wafting up from the diner downstairs, and the stale sweat of the morning rush hour on the subway that I could never seem to wash off. Jake, how much longer are we going to live like this? It was the seventh time Jessica had asked me that question at the dinner table. She poked her fork at the single, lonely-looking steak on her plate, our only protein for the day. The look in her eyes had long since morphed from hope to numbness. Now it was just a hollow, near-desperate void. I paused, my own fork halfway to my mouth, my throat suddenly dry. Jess, just give me a little more time. The project at my company is about to launch. Once the bonuses come in. Bonuses? Is a bonus going to let us buy a place here? Is it going to stop you from having to pack yourself into a subway car like a sardine every single morning? She cut me off. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp as a needle, finding the tenderest part of my ego. Today, Amy in my department got a new bag from her boyfriend. You know the one, the brand I was looking at in the mall last week. Her boyfriend. It's Mark Davis. Mark Davis. That name had become a ghost, haunting our conversations with increasing frequency. Mr. Davis was a director at her firm, a guy in his 40s who drove a white Porsche Panamera. I fell silent. What could I say? I could only lower my head and pretend the white rice in my bowl was the most delicious thing on earth. In the 3 years since graduation, I had gone from an ambitious college grad to just another silent cog in the machine. And Jessica, my girlfriend of 7 years, had transformed from the girl in a white sundress with 2 perfect dimples on the campus green into a city professional whose exhaustion and resentment were etched into the lines around her eyes. I loved her. I thought she loved me. I thought we could get through this rough patch together. Until that night, she said she had to work late again for the 10th time that month. I told her, take it easy, get home when you can, but a knot of anxiety, like a cat clawing at my insides, had already formed. On a strange impulse, I left work early. Instead of going home, I took the subway to her office building in Manhattan. It was 9 p.m., and the lights in the skyscraper were winking out floor by floor. I hid in the shadows of a corner bodega across the street, feeling like a pathetic cliché of a detective. At 9:30, Jessica appeared. She had changed out of her daytime business attire and was wearing a black dress I'd never seen before. It made her skin look like porcelain, her figure elegant and striking. She was wearing a smile I hadn't seen in a long time, relaxed, bright, and genuine. A moment later, a white Porsche Panamera glided silently to the curb beside her. The passenger door opened, and the slightly slick face of Mark Davis leaned out. Jessica's smile widened. She ducked gracefully into the passenger seat. The car pulled away, merging smoothly into the river of traffic, leaving me with a string of fading taillights and a heart that had flashed frozen in my chest. I didn't run after them. I didn't call her, demanding an explanation. I just stood there, all the strength draining out of my body. So this was her working late. A different kind of work, rushing off to a banquet that had nothing to do with me. I don't know how I got back to that tiny studio in Queens. I just remember that when I pushed open the door, that familiar stench of mildew and grease hit me. And for the first time, it made me physically sick. I sat in the dark, sleepless all night. The next day, when Jessica came back, she looked tired, but her eyes were bright. The day after that, and the one after, I was still sitting on the couch when she walked in. She stopped short. Jake, you didn't go to work? I looked at her, at the unfamiliar silk scarf around her neck, hiding what I could only imagine were marks I didn't dare to see. We're done, I said. My voice was so hoarse it didn't sound like my own. Jessica's expression was a flash of complex emotions, surprise, a flicker of panic, but mostly an undeniable wave of relief. She was quiet for a few seconds, then nodded. Okay. She looked down and started gathering her things. Jake, I'm sorry. I'm tired. I don't want to count pennies for groceries anymore. I don't want to cram onto the subway just to save a few bucks on an Uber. I don't want the first thing I do when I see a beautiful dress or a nice bag to be flipping over the price tag. She paused, then looked me straight in the eye, her gaze brutally honest. Mark, you can give me the life I want. I admit it, I'm materialistic, but I just don't want to struggle anymore. You can't give me the future I want, Jake. The future? I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. Our 7 years together mean less than a Porsche and a few designer bags. That's the future you want. Yes, she answered, her voice firm. Love doesn't pay the bills. Jake, you're a good guy, but nice guys finish last. This world only cares about results. She dragged her suitcase to the door and looked back at me one last time. There was no lingering affection in her eyes, only a sliver of pity. Forget about me. I hope. I hope you have a good life someday. The door clicked shut, and in an instant, the world was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. Thump, thump, heavy and slow, like a funeral drum for my dead love and my shattered dignity. For the next 3 days, I was a zombie. The studio filled up with pizza boxes and empty beer cans. I locked myself in that box that was once filled with our laughter, but now only echoed with my own emptiness, chewing on the words Jessica had left behind. This world only cares about results. Results. I looked in the mirror at the man staring back. Unshaven, bloodshot eyes, reeking of stale beer. Was this my result? A loser, beaten by reality and abandoned by the woman I loved? No, this wasn't how my story was going to end. On the fourth morning, the harsh sunlight slicing through the grimy window woke me. My head was splitting from the hangover, but my mind felt strangely clear. I dragged myself out of bed, stumbled in the bathroom, and splashed cold water on my face hard. The man in the mirror looked different. His eyes had changed. It was the look of someone pushed to the edge of a cliff who had decided to jump. I went to my office and handed in my resignation. That project about to launch was just another empty promise from my boss to keep us grinding. I was done waiting. I went back to the studio and threw everything Jessica had left behind into the dumpster downstairs. Then, I started to frantically organize all my notes from my 4 years of college and all the material I'd studied on my own since. My major was artificial intelligence and data science, a field that sounded cutting edge but, at the time, was a little too niche to land a great job easily. But I was obsessed with it. I'd taken a generic programmer job to make a living, writing boring business logic day in and day out, but I had never stopped studying core algorithms on my own time. On all those nights, Jessica complained I wasn't spending enough time with her. I was silently building a model of my own. It was a financial market trend prediction model based on deep learning and complex network theory. In simple terms, it could analyze massive amounts of public data, news articles, financial reports, social media sentiment, macroeconomic policies, to predict the price movements of specific financial assets over a set period. The initial spark for this idea came from one of my college professors, Dr. Evelyn Reed. Evelyn Reed. My heart skipped a beat when her name surfaced in my mind. She was the youngest professor in the department and universally considered a genius. Though she was a professor, she was only 3 years older than me. In her lectures, she never just read from textbook. She had a way of explaining the most complex theories with vivid, real-world examples that made them click. I can still see her at the front of the lecture hall, dressed in a simple white blouse and a knee-length skirt, smiling as she said, "Data itself is cold. But behind the data are the actions, desires, and fears of millions of people. Whoever can learn to read the humanity in the data will hold the key to the future." That sentence planted a seed in my mind that had been growing for years. And now, it was about to break through the soil. I took all of my savings, less than $5,000, and went all in. Part of it went to renting more powerful cloud servers, and the rest was my living expenses for the next few months. I moved out of that studio apartment filled with painful memories and rented a smaller, cheaper room near the university campus. There was no smell of mildew here, only the fresh scent of camphor trees outside my window. For the next 6 months, my world shrank to 3 things: code, data, and algorithms. I slept only 4 hours a night. The rest of the time, I was either optimizing the model or hunting for new data sources to train it on. When I was hungry, I ate bread. When I was thirsty, I drank tap water. I was like a monk, channeling all my pain and bitterness into lines of code in an almost self-destructive frenzy. Through countless iterations and backtests, the model's accuracy grew. It started predicting short-term fluctuations in certain cryptocurrencies and small-cap stocks with over 80% accuracy. I knew the theoretical phase was over. It was time for a real-world test. But I needed capital, a real seed fund, to actually leverage my predictions. I started shopping my 100-page model report and backtesting data around to investors like a madman. The results were predictable. I was dismissed as a scammer, a lunatic. No venture capital firm was willing to believe that some kid with nothing to his name could beat the cutthroat financial markets with a model that sounded like science fiction. It made sense. If an AI model was all it took to print money, what was the point of all those high-paid quants? After a dozen rejections, I was close to giving up. One drizzly afternoon, I sat on a bench on the university lawn, watching the students pass by, feeling like a ghost abandoned by the world. Just then, an umbrella appeared over my head. "Hey, it's raining. You shouldn't be sitting out here." A gentle, familiar voice sounded next to me. I snapped my head up and looked into a pair of eyes as clear as an autumn sky. It was Evelyn Reed. She had an added touch of mature grace that she didn't have a few years ago, dressed in a tasteful beige trench coat, the picture of intellect and elegance. She obviously didn't recognize me. "Dr. Reed," I stammered. She paused, studying my face, then her expression softened in recognition. "You're Jake Miller, the kid from the front row who always asked the wild questions." My face flushed. I couldn't believe she remembered me. "That's me, Professor. What are you doing here? You look like you're going through something." Her eyes drifted to my wrinkled shirt and the dark circles under my eyes. Maybe it was the persistent rain, or maybe it was the warmth in her concerned gaze, but the dam of pressure and frustration I had been holding back for 6 months finally broke. Like a drowning man clinging to a piece of driftwood, I told her everything in a torrent of words, my model, my dream, and the wall I had run into. She didn't interrupt, just listened quietly, as the rain dripped from the edge of her umbrella, creating tiny ripples on the pavement. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment before asking softly, "Do you have your model report with you?" I scrambled to pull the dog-eared, 100-page binder from my backpack. She took it and, standing there in the rain under her umbrella, began to read it page by page. Her expression shifted from calm curiosity to surprise, then to a focused intensity, and finally to genuine admiration. Half an hour later, she closed the report and looked at me, her eyes shining with a light I had never seen before. "Jake, what you've built here is more brilliant than I could have imagined. This isn't just a fantasy. You're creating a new methodology." She paused, then made a decision that would change my life forever. "The seed money. I'll provide it." "Professor, I can't do that." I practically jumped to my feet. "I can't take your money." Evelyn smiled, a gentle smile like the sun after a storm. "First, stop calling me Professor. Call me Evelyn. We're equal partners now. Second, this isn't a handout. It's an investment. I believe in your model, and I believe in you. I believe this investment will bring me returns far beyond my expectations." She looked me straight in the eye and said, word by word, "Jake, I see a reflection of my younger self in you. That pure, all-consuming passion for the technology. I refuse to let that kind of talent be buried because of a lack of seed funding." That day, Evelyn Reed transferred $100,000 to my account. She said it was most of her personal savings and her angel investment in my project. We signed a formal investment agreement. She took a 20% stake. My hand was shaking as I held my phone. This wasn't just money. It was a vote of confidence from a top academic in my field. It was a hand reaching out to me in my darkest hour. I didn't say thank you again because I knew words were meaningless in the face of such trust. The only thing I could do was deliver results. With capital, my Prometheus model could finally leave the world of simulations and enter the real market. I incorporated a small company, Cognition AI. The office was my tiny room near campus. Evelyn didn't just give me money. She used her network to introduce me to 2 of her most brilliant graduate students. One was a genius in back-end architecture, the other a master of data visualization. The 3 of us became the founding team. Those were days fueled by pure passion and adrenaline. We lived and breathed data and code. Evelyn would visit once or twice a week. She never interfered with our operations, but whenever I hit a wall, she would offer a perspective from a higher altitude that cut right to the core of the problem. She'd bring us homemade sandwiches and coffee. When we were arguing heatedly over an algorithm, she would just smile and say, The truth is forged in the fire of debate. With her guidance, Prometheus evolved at a breakneck pace. We started making small-scale trades in the stock and crypto markets. First trade, we put in $10,000. A week later, it was $12,000. Second trade, we put in $20,000. 3 days later, it was $27,000. Third, wealth was accumulating faster than I had ever imagined. The cold formulas and theories from my textbooks were now real, pulsing numbers on a screen. 6 months later, our initial capital of $100,000 had snowballed into over $2 million. We were no longer content with just trading for ourselves. I packaged the model's analytical output into a subscription service for boutique hedge funds. The first month, 3 small funds signed on. The second month, that number grew to 10. By the third month, a well-known multi-billion-dollar fund approached us. After a 1-month trial, they offered to buy an exclusive license for our U.S. equity strategy for the next year. The price was in the 8 figures. On the day of the signing, I wore my first ever custom-tailored suit, sitting in a spacious, light-filled conference room across from the fund CEO. After we signed, he shook my hand, smiling. "Mr. Miller, you're a prodigy. Your Prometheus model is the most impressive quantitative strategy we have ever seen. Bar none. The way it captures market sentiment. It's like an art form." Mr. Miller. The name felt surreal. A year ago, I was just Jake, crammed into a studio apartment, stressing over a bonus of a few $1,000s. Walking out of that gleaming financial tower, the sunlight was bright. Evelyn was waiting at the curb in her modest white sedan. I got in and handed her the contract. She glanced at it, set it aside, and handed me a bottle of water. "You worked hard for this." "Evelyn," I said, looking at her gentle profile, "the company is now valued at over $20 million. According to our agreement, your $100,000 investment is now worth $4 million. She kept her eyes on the road. "I told you I invested in you, not the money." My heart swelled with an emotion I couldn't name. I watched the cityscape blur past my window, the towering skyscrapers, the hurried crowds, and suddenly it all felt sharp and clear. Jessica was right. This world only cares about results. But what she didn't get was that on the road to those results, some people take shortcuts and others choose to climb mountains. I chose the mountain, and I was lucky enough to find a guide and a partner for the ascent. After the company was on solid footing, the first thing I did was buy a sprawling penthouse in the best part of the city. From the floor-to-ceiling windows, you could see the entire glittering expanse of the Manhattan skyline. I gave one of the keys to Evelyn. "This is your office and your lounge. No more crowding into that little room," I said. She took the key without protest, just smiled and said, "Looks like my investment is paying off quite well." Our relationship was quietly changing through our time together. We were more than just business partners. We started going to concerts, visiting art galleries, and attending AI conferences around the world. We talked about algorithms, philosophy, the universe, and the meaning of life. Being with her was like being a sponge, constantly absorbing new knowledge and perspectives. She made me understand that true wealth wasn't about material possessions, but about the richness of your inner world. I realized I was hopelessly in love with her. This woman, 3 years my senior, once my professor, was now my soulmate. One autumn evening, we were driving back from an academic dinner. Debussy's Clair de Lune was playing softly in the car. I pulled up in front of her building, but didn't turn off the engine. "Evelyn," I said, mustering all my courage and turning to face her. "Can I ask you out on a real date?" She didn't seem surprised, just watched me quietly, her eyes like a deep, tranquil lake. "Jake, do you understand the gap between us?" she asked softly. "And I'm not talking about age." "I know," I nodded. "You're like the moon in the sky, and I'm just a normal guy who is crawling through the mud." "No," she shook her head. "In my eyes, you shine brighter than anyone. But are you sure about this? Your life is just beginning. You have infinite possibilities ahead of you. I might hold you back. You're not a restraint. You're my harbor and my lighthouse," I said, taking her hand. It was cool to the touch, but soft. "Without you, I might still be in that studio, staring at a computer screen. You showed me what my life could be. You made me a better version of myself." I want to see the world with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to marry you." The last two words came out trembling, but with absolute certainty. Evelyn's eyes began to well up. She didn't speak, but her fingers tightened around mine. In that moment, I knew her answer. Our wedding was a small, private affair, with only our closest family and friends. No lavish spectacle, no media circus. In a small chapel overlooking the ocean, I put a ring on her finger. As I said my vows, looking into her smiling, tear-filled eyes, I felt like I had the entire world. Married life was peaceful and happy. Under my leadership, Cognition AI grew into a unicorn in the fintech space. Our Prometheus model, after several major upgrades, became the industry benchmark. I no longer had to write code myself. My role shifted to steering the company's strategic vision. And Evelyn, she chose to return to academia. She turned down my offer to take a senior executive role at the company, saying that teaching and mentoring the next generation was her true passion. I respected her choice. I had the company donate a new artificial intelligence research center to her university in her name and establish the Reed Scholarship to fund talented, low-income students like I used to be. I often sat in on her lectures. Watching her at the front of the class, so vibrant and passionate, I would always think of that young, insecure kid sitting in the front row, looking up at her in awe. It felt like life had come full circle. But this time after class, she would walk over, take my arm, and smile. "So, Mr. Miller, did you understand the lesson today? What do you want for dinner?" I thought the story of Jessica and me was long over, a forgotten prologue, until I saw her again at a high-end gala. It was an event hosted by the city to promote networking between tech and finance firms. As the head of a rising tech company, I was on the guest list. Evelyn attended with me as a special guest from the academic community. The ballroom was a sea of tuxedos and gowns, humming with conversation and the clinking of champagne glasses. I was chatting with a few industry heavyweights when a familiar, yet strangely distant, figure entered my line of sight. It was Jessica. She was poured into a tight, royal blue evening gown, her makeup heavy and immaculate. She was on the arm of a portly, middle-aged man. I recognized him, a man named Peterson, the CEO of another tech company with a reputation for being sleazy. Jessica clearly saw me at the same moment. The instant our eyes met, the polished smile on her face froze. She instinctively dropped Peterson's arm, her eyes wide with shock, disbelief, and a flicker of panic. She probably never imagined she would see me again here, like this. What she definitely didn't imagine was the woman standing beside me. Evelyn was wearing a timeless champagne-colored dress, her grace and quiet confidence outshining all the glittering jewelry in the room. She could command attention just by standing still. Jessica's gaze darted between me and Evelyn, finally landing on our intertwined hands. The color drained from her face. Mr. Peterson, noticing her strange behavior, followed her gaze. When he saw me, his face immediately broke into a sycophantic grin. "Well, if it isn't the man of the hour, Jake Miller of Cognition AI, a real pleasure to finally meet you," he said, practically dragging Jessica over to us. "Mr. Peterson," I acknowledged with a slight nod. "Mr. Miller, allow me to introduce." Peterson began, gesturing toward Evelyn, clearly mistaking her for my date. "This is my wife, Dr. Evelyn Reed," I said with a smile, pulling her just a little closer to my side. The word wife hit Jessica like a physical blow. She swayed on her feet, looking like she might collapse. And Mr. Peterson, upon hearing the name Evelyn Reed, audibly gasped. His demeanor instantly became one of deep reverence. "The Dr. Reed from Metropolitan University? It's an honor, a true honor. I've read your papers countless times. You're a pioneer in our entire field." Evelyn offered him a polite smile. "You're too kind, Mr. Peterson." Peterson then gestured awkwardly at the pale-faced Jessica beside him. "And this is my companion, Jessica." Jessica's lips moved, but no sound came out. She looked at Evelyn as if she wanted to say something, perhaps acknowledge her as a former professor, but she was paralyzed. She stared at me, her eyes a toxic swirl of regret, jealousy, and bitterness that twisted her beautiful features into something ugly. She couldn't comprehend how the broke kid she'd written off as having no future was now standing here, a man that her new sugar daddy had to look up to. Even less could she comprehend that the woman by his side wasn't some young, beautiful trophy, but someone whose intellect, class, and social standing were so far beyond her reach as to be on another planet. This was 100 times more painful for her than just seeing that I was now rich. This was a complete and utter takedown on every conceivable level. I didn't give her a second glance, treating her as if she were a complete stranger. Taking Evelyn's hand, I turned to Peterson. "If you'll excuse us, Mr. Peterson, I need to introduce my wife to a friend over there." And with that, I put my arm around Evelyn and we walked away. I could feel Jessica's scorching, complicated stare on my back until we were lost in the crowd. Evelyn gently squeezed my hand. "So, well, that was her?" she murmured. "I don't remember having her as a student." "Well, if I hadn't sat in the front row and asked a million questions, you probably wouldn't remember me either," I said, sighing softly. "It's all in the past." "The way she was looking at you didn't seem like it was in the past," Evelyn teased, a playful note in her voice. I smiled, leaned in, and whispered in her ear, "That's because my eyes, from the very beginning, have only ever seen you." A faint blush colored Evelyn's cheeks, and she gave me a gentle, chiding look. Not long after the gala, I heard through the grapevine what happened to Jessica. The man she had been with, Mark Davis, her former boss, was not the wealthy bachelor she thought he was. He had a formidable wife with a very powerful family. Somehow, the wife found out about Jessica and stormed into his office. The scene, I was told, was legendary. The wife didn't scream or cry. She showed up with 2 lawyers and members of the company's board and, in front of the entire department, laid out a clear, documented case of how Davis had embezzled company funds to buy Jessica cars, bags, and other gifts. Davis was suspended and investigated on the spot, his career and reputation destroyed. And Jessica became the sordid centerpiece of the scandal. The wife called her a homewrecker to her face, her coworkers stared at her with contempt, and the company fired her for gross misconduct and damaging the company's image. All the gifts and money Davis had given her were clawed back as part of the couple's shared assets. To save his own skin, Davis immediately cut all ties with her, taking back the Panamera and the keys to the luxury apartment she had barely settled into. Overnight, Jessica's world came crashing down. She had traded her youth and our relationship for a dream, and now she was left with nothing but debt and humiliation. The news didn't affect me. It felt like an inevitable, logical conclusion. You reap what you sow. I was busy with our next round of funding and expanding into overseas markets, and I soon forgot about it. Until one rainy afternoon a month later. I had just finished a transatlantic video conference and was walking out of my building to drive home and pick up Evelyn from the university. A thin figure holding an umbrella was standing in the downpour, looking as if she had been waiting for a long time. It was Jessica. She wore no makeup. Her face was pale, and a few strands of wet hair were plastered to her cheeks, making her look utterly haggard. She was wearing a faded, worn-out trench coat that was a world away from the glamorous woman I remembered. When she saw me, she rushed forward, a desperate, fawning smile on her face. "Jake!" I stopped and looked at her calmly. "Can I help you?" My tone was polite but distant. She bit her lip, and her eyes instantly reddened. "Jake, I was wrong. I was so wrong." Rain streamed down her face, indistinguishable from her tears. "I know it's too late to say anything now. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just wanted to tell you I regret it. Leaving you was the stupidest mistake of my entire life." She began to sob, her words tumbling out in a rush. She told me Davis had lied to her, that his wife had publicly shamed her, that she'd lost her job and could barely make rent. She said she finally understood that all the material things were meaningless and that the only real thing she ever had was what we shared in that tiny studio. "Jake, can we go back?" She looked up, her eyes filled with a pitiful, pleading hope. "I know you're married now, but your wife is so much older than you. You can't be happy. I'm the one who knows you best. We can start over. I'll do anything for you. I can." "That's enough." My voice was cold, cutting her off. I looked at this weeping woman and felt not a shred of pity, only a profound sense of weary disgust. "Jessica, are you confused about something?" I began slowly, my voice low but sharp as ice. "You don't regret your actions. You regret that your shortcut hit a dead end. You're not nostalgic for our relationship. You're nostalgic for the fact that I can now give you the life you've always wanted. Do you really think I'm still the same naive guy who would melt at the first sign of your tears? I took a step closer, looking down at her, my eyes devoid of any warmth. Let me tell you what the real difference is between us. Back then, you threw away our 7 years for a designer bag and a Porsche. Meanwhile, my wife, Evelyn, when I had nothing and the whole world was telling me no, took her entire life savings and invested in my dream. You saw my struggle as a burden. She saw my potential. You think you know me. The only version of me you knew was the one who cooked for you in a tiny apartment and ate ramen for a month to save up for your birthday gift. You don't know the man I am today. You couldn't even begin to understand him. Every word was a knife, twisting in her heart. Her face went from pale to ashen, and she swayed on her feet. So save your cheap tears and your pathetic excuses. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my wallet, and took out all the cash inside, a few $1,000s, and tossed it on the wet pavement in front of her. This isn't for you. This is a bouquet of flowers for the funeral of our dead relationship. Take it. Go run a decent place, find a real job, and learn to stand on your own 2 feet. And don't ever come near me again. When you said I was out of your league, you were right. It was never about the money. It was about the fact that we now live in completely different worlds. Without another glance, I walked to my car. Behind me, I could hear her heart-wrenching sobs. I opened the door and got in. The car was warm, and classical music, Evelyn's favorite, was playing softly through the speakers. I started the engine. In the rearview mirror, I saw Jessica collapsed on the sidewalk in the rain, like a broken doll abandoned by the world. I didn't hesitate. I pressed the accelerator, and the car moved smoothly into traffic, heading for home. Outside, the rain began to stop. Across the sky, a brilliant rainbow was starting to form. My life was a different landscape now, and that ugly chapter of my past had finally, at long last, been washed completely clean by the rain.